Hey, welcome back to Reviewing While Driving. Today we're going to talk about character, or I should say player types. This is part 2 of my series, and this is about Powergamers. Yes. Now, Powergamers are kind of a group of people that get a bad rep. Powergamers, there are pros and cons. The term itself, I think a lot of people, it's become a pejorative, right? I mean, I think everybody sort of knows what they, it's like the definition of pornography, right? You know it when you see it, but it's hard to define. I think for the purposes of this video, when I say power gamer, I'm talking about somebody that puts the maximization of their character and knowledge of the rules to the forefront of their entire gaming experience, and the purpose of which is so that they can win. And they may define winning in different ways. And so, and this is not always, or even ever, necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that you need to be aware of. And I think that there's a gamist tendency to do this, right? I mean, anybody who likes games plays games because they enjoy the thought process and winning, and it is a mental competition, right? And when you're playing a game, so this is something that people like to do because if they want to win. I mean, it's no different than a coach. Like if you're Bill Belichick and you're the coach of the Patriots, you're going to come up with innovative ways to try to win. You're going to understand the rules. You're going to exploit the rules and find the best way to win. And so that's all a power gamer is, really. It's just exported to a tabletop role-playing game. And so it's not bad, it just is what it is. So we're going to talk about kind of how to deal with those sorts of players, because they can really present a challenge, especially if they're good at it. So the two challenges they mainly present, and we'll talk about their good qualities too. And I suppose in fairness I should do that first. So they've got good attributes and challenges. The good attribute that I think of first is they know the game. And sometimes power gamers know the rules better than you might. They can be helpful as far as knowing how to handle an out of combat stealth and perception roll, or they may be useful in battle mapping because they enjoy the strategy and the tactics and the positioning. They may be helpful to you in measuring things out on the map. They can help the other players who maybe are new to the game and don't understand how the rules work or how combat works in particular. Also, they are into their characters. Now, they may not be into their characters in a role-playing sense necessarily. Some are. There are role-playing power gamers, believe it or not. But they are into their characters, and so you will not have a problem with a power gamer about liking his character. If he doesn't like his character, he's not going to play it. He's going to want to play something that gives him that power gamer joy, which is going to be from winning and being really good at whatever it is. And not just really good, he wants to be the best. Okay, and this is really important when you're dealing with the psychology of the power gamer, is to find ways to let them be the best at something. That is by far my number one piece of advice. Your takeaway from this video should be, don't fight the power gamer. Just make sure you find a way to let him be excellent, because that's what he really wants to do. He's about maximizing. So there's some other positive aspects of power gamers. They are, in addition to being knowledgeable and helpful about the rules and being into their character, power gamers will also push you to be a better DM. And not just because they can be obnoxious sometimes, but in terms of encounter design. Once you've played a few games with a power gamer, you look at your encounters and you're like, man, I got to step this up. This is too easy. And that there's a double-edged sword there, but the important thing is that you that you see that the Power Gamer is making you better at the gamist part of the game. And that's another thing I should say before we get to the negatives is, you know, we all have a little bit of that gamist in us, right? I mean, even anybody who, unless you're a pure role player, pure storyteller type, most people want to have a character that is effective, you know, that you're good at stuff, that you can be good in combat and, have fun in the war game, moving the miniatures around part of the game, okay? Nobody wants to be just a complete, liability on the battlefield. Everybody wants to be able to do something, even if it's in a supporting role. So, and that's the other thing about Power Gamers is, even though that they want to be good at something, they don't necessarily have to be the best at the same thing, okay? So there are some Power Gamers who will create like if you say, okay, Power Gamer, you need to be a cleric who is a healer, they may grumble at first, but then you can bet they're going to come up with the best healer under the rules that you could possibly think of. They're going to find every feat. They're going to find the right character class and race combination. They're going to maximize their stats correctly. They're going to position themselves properly to use all their healing. So make no mistake, the Power Gamer is an effective player, and if your players are bad as a group at the Power Gamer part of it, of the game, you know, the gamist part of the game, it doesn't play the same. I mean, the rules sort of presuppose that there's this sort of, average, median skill level of the player base, right? And not everybody is as good as everybody else. And you can tell that when you go, you play in a home group and then you go play at a convention or at a game store. You can tell that there's a difference in ability between groups and between players. So, again, I am not knocking Power Gamering as a institution, okay? It is a good and necessary thing. But there's an excess to it that becomes a problem. So, the first problem I've already alluded to, and that is what's challenging to the Power Gamer is overwhelmingly awful and insurmountable, basically, for a non-Power Gamer. And this is more apparent at higher levels. So what you'll find is by the time the characters are, 5th or 7th or 9th level or so, the Power Gamer is operating at a, that's, I guess, in the game, it's now Tier 2 in 5th edition D&D. So in that second tier of levels, the Power Gamer is doing all his stuff, right? If he's a spellcaster, he's got Fireball, he's got Lightning Bolt, he's got Cone of Cold, he's got mass damage, he's got single target damage if he's a spellcaster. If he's a melee fighter, I can guarantee you he will be in the best armor, he will have whatever the best weapon is he can get his hands on. He will be positioned correctly, he will have exactly the right feats to fulfill whatever role he's playing. And then when he's actually playing, you can bet that he's going to extract the maximum impact out of his character. And so they're very effective. And what ends up happening is you end up trying to design an encounter either for him, and it's usually a he, not always. I think I've only met one female Power Gamer. This seems to be more of a male thing, to be honest. So you either end up designing an encounter completely around the Power Gamer, and you run the risk of killing everybody else, or at least, overwhelming them, let's say. Or you design an encounter that's a cakewalk for the Power Gamer, so that you don't end up maiming everybody else, okay? And again, this is a problem that becomes more apparent the higher level you get. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that, especially, this is true if you have a big group sorry for the shakiness. If you have a big group of players, a lot of times players occupy roles that are overlapping. Okay, so for instance, I run regularly in a big group of guys where there's usually 8 or 9 or 10 players every session. Okay, well, that's a lot. And so what happens is the overlap factor becomes a problem for the other players. So, like, let's say that the Powergamer is a wizard. Okay. Well, the Powergamer wizard is going to have all the spells he needs for the battle he's about to fight, if he knows what the battle is. He's going to have a giant spell book. He's going to know all the rituals. He will have copied everybody else's spells into his book so he can do everything. And so if there's another wizard in the party, he stands the very real chance of being completely overshadowed by the Powergamer. And so you have a couple ways to deal with that. One is to, and there's several. One of the ways would be to take him out, basically to concentrate your efforts on disposing of the Powergamer and let the other player, come out. Another way would be to give the Powergamer something really specific to do, or the other player who's being overshadowed. Either way, but to give one of them something to do so that the Powergamer isn't completely dominating that other player. Okay. And so what you'll see is that the Powergamer problems are often kind of in relative terms, right? It's relative to the other players and what the other players are doing. It's that they don't because they're built to excel and be better than, right? They kind of it kind of goes against the whole group dynamic and the group thought that's a part of the game. I mean, it's a cooperative game. It's not. I mean, you don't want all the other players feeling like they're his sidekick, right? That's not what this is. So, by the way, if you had a game where there was a hero and sidekicks, the Powergamer's the right guy to be the hero. Just if you were to make that kind of game, put him in that position. Trust me. Otherwise, the sidekick will overcome the hero. So the other part about power gaming that has a real negative rap is sort of their sort of single-mindedness and focus on the rules and being the best, and so some power gamers completely abandon the other parts of the game. They're not really interested in interactions. And some of them, and some of them would rather, because they're built around the rules, if there's a mechanism for them to roll dice, they're going to want to do that, some of them, rather than using their thinking and their interactive abilities to get through a problem or to deal with an interaction. Okay, so for instance, a power gamer who's not really an interactor type, let's say he's built a face man type bard character. He's going to be the best persuader, the best charmer. He's going to power game that. Okay, so it's time to approach the guard. Okay, well I use my disguise kit and try to look like the prince. Okay, and so he's gonna do what he has to do to make die rolls. Okay, to substitute for other stuff. An interactor player might go into more great detail about how he's going to find the costume for the prince. He's going to study the prince's mannerisms. He's going to role play how he's going to imitate the prince to get past the guard. Okay. The power gamer who doesn't have those abilities is simply going to want to roll dice. And he's going to want to roll dice for every piece of that. He's going to say, okay, I want to, now I'm trying to smooth talk my way past the guard. Okay, well that's, I want to roll persuasion, right? So he'll have a 20 charisma, of course, and he's going to have expertise in the persuasion skill, and so he's going to have this maxed out proficiency in persuasion. He will also engineer other situations so that he can have advantage perhaps on that roll. But you get my point. The power gamer is going to want to use the rules to get through the game, unless they also happen to have a role player or interactive bent to them. Okay. So it's a challenge, because sometimes they won't understand, or they'll be frustrated, the pure power gamer, with, okay, well, tell me what you say. Well, they don't want to do that. They just want to roll the dice. They want to be excellent, and they don't want to have to be creative necessarily. They want to just use the rules because that's what they've done. They're saying, well, wait, I'm the best interactor in the group because I have a high charisma and I have expertise and so forth. Well, okay, but you still have to tell me what you want to do, right? You still have to explain the process. So what I would do with that kind of player is simply let them be good and let them roll the dice, but also make them play the other parts of the game. Make them tell you what they're doing, what they're saying. Make them play the rest of the game, okay? Not just the dice part of the game, okay? Now, probably the most, stereotypical power gamer behavior is rules lawyering, and that's I got the tie on, so I'm well suited for this topic, right? So. And this is not entirely fair, because, again, as I've said, as their pro, this is a pro of theirs, they do know how to play the game. And that's not bad. But sometimes they will misremember or misapply. Some will flat out lie to you with absolute certainty that this is the way that the rule is supposed to be played, or this is how the game works. And they will get very angry when you don't let them be great at whatever it is they want to do. They won't care so much if it doesn't affect them. Some will. There are rules lawyers out there who will want to rules lawyer everything, even other people's stuff. That's a whole other problem. That's kind of this insecure person that's seeking to dominate everybody else, right? But for the power gamer is primarily interested in the rules that affect him. So as long as you're allowing them to be great, they will not care as much. But remember that their pathway to being great is by their knowledge and exploitation and maximization of the rules, right? So they're going to want to tell you how their stuff works, and they will know it cold, okay? And these guys will go out. And this was really bad in 3rd edition D&D, where there was all the splat books and a zillion character prestige classes and feats. And so as a DM, unless you kept up with all this stuff, there was a real risk. And this still happens now, even with playtest rules and stuff, where you run the risk of the player knowing more about the rules than you do. And so what I would encourage you to do is, if you have a power gamer player who has some sort of exotic feat or spell or character class, that you make sure you know it and that you understand it. And if you don't understand it, you need to negotiate and deal with that player ahead of time and say, okay, tell me how this works. Like, for example, I have a player right now in our home game who is playing a psionic, okay? Well, that, as of right now, in June of 2016, that is a playtest character class that is not in the player's handbook, okay? And so we're using this version of it that's in the, one of the online resources for the game. I think it's Unearthed Arcana, okay? All right. I don't have a problem with that, and I've talked about this character in other videos. He's very powerful. And the guy wanted to play sort of this mind reader guy with a secret power who would be this, controller, dominant guy, but he also has melee abilities with his psionic blades, basically, that come out of his hands. So he's this real gishy character. Well, if I'm not careful, I mean, he can say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to use these PowerPoints and do this, and then I'm going to do that," and at some point, and the other players all kind of have a question mark over their head because they don't know what these rules are. They don't have any idea. So if you're not careful, you can end up where everybody's just sort of taking his word for it that he can do all this stuff, and and then everybody else is kind of looking like, "Oh, okay, well, here he goes again. He's this Gish character that is, the most interesting man in the world, and he's going to dominate everybody." So you have to make sure that you enforce, that you understand what they can do, that you know the rules with the Powergamer, the specific rules that they're trying to play with, and that you hold them to it and make them show you how they got there. And believe me, they'll be excited to show you, because it lets them show everybody how smart they are and how brilliant they are in coming up with this great character concept. And gosh, if like it with this character, and I'm not making fun of him, okay, he's a great player, he role plays wonderfully, but he's a power gamer too. And so I'll say, okay, tell me how you got there, show me how this sonic PowerPoint lets you do this effect, okay? And so I've made him tell me and break it down for me so that I can understand it. And that kind of heads off some of the rules arguments, it kind of nips them in the bud. It's been said many other times in many other places with, rules lawyer, power gamer types, that you want to have the rules conversations before or after the game and not in game. There is nothing that kills immersion and storytelling and the whole wonderful zen zone of good gaming. There's nothing that kills that worse than some off-topic rules discussion, or even if it's on topic, where everybody's stopping down and has their nose in a book. That is a flow killer. So don't let that occur in game. I would simply make a ruling and then move on. Now, it's okay to make a bad ruling, and it's okay to go against the power gamer. But if you're wrong, you need to be prepared to hear about it early and often, and you need to go to him and say, "Okay, I now understand the rule. You were right." But it's better to get it wrong and fix it later, or fix it next time. You can't undo past events, but you can fix it in the future for future occasions. And I would tell everybody, I say, "Hey, me and Joe talked about this rule, and Joe was right, and here's how it works." Or and this happens too, especially if Joe, the power gamer, is a guy who likes to bend the rules a little bit. It's okay to communicate with everybody and say, "Okay, because of problems that we had at the last session, this rule came up." Like, let's say, I don't know, stealth, or I'm trying to think of a game rule that would be a common occurrence. Something like stealth or perception, some kind of rule that could be confusing to some people. It's okay to come out and make an announcement, or put it on, in writing as part of your campaign materials, and say, "Okay, this is how this mechanic works," and just say, "This is the rule." And a power gamer may be mad if he doesn't like the rule, but the biggest thing a power gamer wants to know is, what are the rules, so that I can follow the rules and exploit the rules and maximize the rules, okay? So even if they feel like you've gimped their character by changing the rules, at least they know what the rules are. So just remember that they're going to find the weak spots in the game. And I will tell you this before I sign off on this topic. There are some power gamers out there that are what I would consider to be malicious, okay? And I don't mean it malicious in terms of other people, okay? But they're malicious to the game itself. Their goal is to actually break the game. And they do this out of a sense of intellectual curiosity, out of the other reasons we talked about, to be superior or to be smart. And it sort of breaks the third or the fourth wall of the game when somebody intentionally decides to take the game off the rails. In other words, they're not playing the same game everybody else is, right? Everybody else is playing the game of D&D, and they're telling a story, and they're questing, and they're adventuring, they're having fun, fortune and glory, all that stuff. But the malicious power gamer this is all sort of an intellectual exercise for him. And that player is very dangerous for a campaign, because that's not what you're trying to do. And I would strongly encourage you to watch out for that kind of player. They are not normal. Some of them have what I would consider to be mental health issues, okay? I mean, to be blunt. I mean, there's gamers are a diverse bunch, and there's some odd ducks in every group, and there are definitely odd gamers out there. So, just be on the lookout. I'll give you an example of the malicious power gamer, and then I'll sign off. So, in 3rd edition, there was a spell. I forget what it was, but it was enlarge or shrink object. That was the effect. It allowed you to make things get smaller and bigger and smaller and bigger. And so the player went around the world collecting hunks of scrap metal. Okay, but he wouldn't tell anybody what he was doing. He just said, "Oh no, I'm just gonna, get this scrap metal and thank you." And he wouldn't tell the DM either. So he collected the scrap metal over many sessions. And what he did was, when he got a sufficient quantity in his mind, he cast this spell. He was a wizard that took this giant hunk of metal down to a smaller hunk of metal that maybe weighed, I don't know, a pound or two instead of several hundred pounds. And so then his shtick was, and you can probably see where this is going, he would carry around these small pieces of metal and then cast his spell to enlarge it back to its regular size, or dispel the piece of metal. I forget how he did it exactly. So that the piece of metal would fall on somebody and crush them, or use it as a missile weapon, and then boom, it turns into a boxcar and then crushes somebody. So that was his shtick. Well, so he was basically trying to engineer a way to turn a relatively innocuous 2nd or 3rd level spell into essentially an instant death effect, right? I mean, the damage he was claiming he should be able to do because of the force of this 1,000-pound piece of metal, he wanted to do, I think, 10 or 12 d6 worth of damage for a 2nd level spell. Well, that breaks the game. And he was also fond of casting the explosive runes spell on a blank scroll and handing it to somebody and trying to use it as a basically a bomb. Here you go, boom. And to some extent that's clever, as a one-off tactic. I can see that in certain campaigns being funny, but I'm just trying to describe to you the kind of player he was. He liked to find extreme advantages or create them from the existing rules. And there are